Why I quit my six-figure job and retired to Thailand. I'm going to wager a guess that you clicked on this video because you may well be where I was some years ago, feeling kind of stuck in your job, making and spending money trying to find, build, or buy happiness. Feeling okay most of the time, but deep in your heart thinking, this is not the life I want for myself. Or maybe you're a subscriber to our channel. And if that's the case, hey friends, welcome back. I'm trying something a bit different here, but I hope and think you'll find it interesting. Testing 1, 2, is this better? And one colonoscopy later, I was diagnosed with, I'm about nose level now. Let me start by saying we're not rich, Western standards. My wife and I had it pretty good in Tokyo. I was making over 6 figures and she was doing quite well herself. We owned a modest house. I had a 10-minute commute to work, nice neighbors, great friends. We were saving money and taking vacations every year. So why, you might ask, would we leave all that comfort for a somewhat risky early retirement? For me, there were 3 simple and concrete reasons. Let me start by saying we're not rich. Not by Western standards anyways. I wasn't born in a rich family and neither was my wife. First chapter in the journey is why I moved from New York City to Tokyo in 2003 with only about $5,000 in the bank. It's also reason number 1 why I retired. And that is this: it was no longer my dream to be there. Maybe not for all of you, but remember when you landed that awesome job you're in now? Or before you moved to that great city that you call home, and the words you used with your friends over a beer to describe it? It's my dream job, dude. Living in New York is a dream come true for me. Yeah, that was me too. It was May of 1996, and I just finished grad school with my MFA. I was going to be a working actor, or so I thought. After a summer Shakespeare Festival gig in Wisconsin, I moved to the East Village in New York City. I was so psyched. Soon after arriving, I got a corporate job in sales, and not long after, I was making pretty good money. My first apartment turned out to be a crap living situation. But that happens to just about everyone at some point in time who lives in New York. So, a few months later, I packed up my stuff again and moved over the bridge to Brooklyn. Hello, A-Train. After a couple of years, I'd saved up enough cash for a down payment on a 1-bedroom co-op. That would turn out to be one of the best financial decisions of my life. But it wasn't enough to keep me happy. Slowly, my hatred for the work began to outweigh the love of the money. I worked in the trade show industry, renting floor space and sponsorships to potential exhibitors. All day long, I sat in this morbid, gray-clothed cubicle, cold calling people, while trying to still make it as an actor. It was a soul-sucking grind, unless I made a sale that day. Then I would think about how I was going to treat myself to a nice dinner that weekend, or what I was going to buy next. It was this crazy cycle of depression followed by shopping and eating therapy. I did do some awesome theater with some wickedly talented people while I was in New York. And I was never more alive than I was in the late 90s, grinding it out and partying in New York. But that's a story for another video. The millennium came and went, our computers still worked, so I went to Tokyo to visit an old friend of mine who had been living there, and it blew my mind. It couldn't have been more different from the States. And from that trip, my flame for adventure was relit. A short 2 months later, I looked at myself in the office bathroom on some random Monday morning and declared to myself, I'm moving to Tokyo. I'm moving to Tokyo. I'm moving to Tokyo. Motorbikes. So after a couple of years of stops and starts, I pulled the trigger. And in January of 2003, I rented out my co-op, packed up much more stuff than I needed, and along with my dog Elvis and 3-month tourist visa in hand, we moved to Tokyo, Japan. No job, less than $5,000 in the bank. I had enough of New York, and I'd figure it out after I got there. Looking back now, I was crazy. It was insanity. Have you ever heard the saying, you make your own luck? I'm a firm believer in that, in the power of positivity. Bad stuff will happen to you in your life. I mean, you will fail, you will fall, you get fired from a job, maybe make some big mistakes, but everyone does. And if those kinds of things are not happening to you, I would submit to you that you're not taking enough risk in your life. Through failure is how we learn as humans. I've learned just about as much from my mistakes, maybe more, than my successes. If there's just one thing you take away from this video, it's don't be afraid of failure. Failures don't define you. They refine you. They make you better, sharper, smarter, and less likely to make that same mistake again. To me, my story seems obvious. It's just this little series of dots that connect so perfectly into getting me here to Thailand. First dot. I've been nomadic since I was the age of 18 when I joined the US Navy right out of high school. Frankly, because I had no drive and I didn't want to go to college. In the 6 years I served, I traveled to the Philippines, Africa, Seychelles, and a few other places. Ironically, neither Japan nor Thailand. As a result, this nomadic spirit became part of who I am. And this is the key, because every time I moved, I was faced with significant challenges. I had to find a job, a place to live, and make all new relationships. And by overcoming these challenges and a whole host of others, I grew exponentially. But I always needed a good reason to stay there. And each and every time when a good reason no longer existed, I knew it was time to move on. 19 years in Japan flew by. I loved my career in education. I loved being a mentor for kids. It was the most meaningful work I've done in my life. And when it came time to making the decision to quit, there was a whole cadre of students that I would have to leave behind. And that was hard. But leaving the rest, that was easy. No regrets whatsoever. The culture there was changing. The offices, more quiet, less laughter, and many good people were leaving. The negatives were beginning to outweigh the positives. The money was as much a trap as it was a blessing. And given what's happened to the yen since we departed, boy, it makes us look like a couple of financial geniuses. The second reason I quit at 57, cancer. Cancer has decimated my family. I've lost my mom and 2 sisters to the disease. When my 40th birthday arrived, I was living in Tokyo and on national health care. When you hit 40 in Japan, you get a postcard in the mail offering you a free health screening. But I was in excellent health, or so I thought. I ran the New York City Marathon in 2000 and was still an avid runner. Nonetheless, Tomo encouraged me to have the exam. And from the blood screening, one thing led to another, and one colonoscopy later, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. It was my turn. About 3 weeks later, the surgeons performed what's called a right hemicolectomy and removed the ascending section of my colon. At the same time, they took 12 biopsies from surrounding lymph nodes and sent them to the lab to be checked for metastasis. All of them came back negative. My surgery was deemed curative. That postcard and moving to Japan, well, saved my life. 5 days later, I paid the bill, which was less than $4,000 US, by the way. Checked out of the hospital, and with a bunch of very large staples in my stomach holding the incision closed, and much to my wife's dismay, I got on my bicycle and rode home, stating earnestly, if this didn't kill me, I'm riding home on the horse I rode in on. For the record, we lived about 10 minutes away, mostly downhill. And even though I could feel the skin of my stomach tearing away ever so slightly at the staples, it was one of the best bike rides of my life. Why does this matter? Because ever since then, I've felt like I'm living on bonus time. Which leads me to reason number 3. What difference can I make? When I was young, I had one goal.
I am Iron Man.
Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating slightly, but I was going to do so much with my life, and nobody over the age of 40 was going to tell me that it wasn't possible. I was definitely going to be rich, and maybe famous, and powerful. Lofty goals for a 10-year-old. When you're young, you think the world is your oyster. As you age, you come to realize that if you eat them often enough, you're going to get food poisoning. Do those really look safe, given the fact that he's probably been out in the hot sun here all day, and his bed of ice is looking more like the bath I took last night? My point is this. As I've aged, I have begun to accept the difference between my circle of concern and my circle of influence. My circle of concern has a whole host of things inside it. The war in Ukraine, gun violence in the United States, the declining birth rate in Japan, and my neighbor's female cat, who has this terrible need to scream and wail every third Wednesday at 2 a.m. in the morning. Then there's my circle of influence. In that circle might be what restaurant my wife and I decide to eat at, or where we take our next vacation, or maybe where my neighbor's cat does her wailing. There might be some overlap between my circle of concern and my circle of influence, but understanding what lives where, well, that sure makes life a lot easier. And when I realized that the creative ceiling at my job was outside of my circle of influence, well, that changed everything. The moment I was able to clearly move that item from my circle of influence to my circle of concern, a whole world of other opportunities became possible. It was a very freeing experience. That allowed me to let go of so much that I was holding on to. I was free to dream of a new adventure, one where Tomo and I would live in Thailand, where walking on the beach with the dogs was a daily activity, a simple and quiet existence away from much of the noise and insanity that seems to fill the news these days. Will we have enough money? I don't know. But I don't know if I'll be alive in 2 years. And as the playwright Moss Hart wrote, you can't take it with you. The truth is, you will never have enough money, and you will always find reasons to stay. As an actor in conservatory, you get notes every day from your director after rehearsal. And the note might simply be, I didn't think you were in the moment when you said XYZ. And that's what I'm trying to make my life about these days, about staying in the moment, this moment, and enjoying it for what it is, and trying not to think about the future or too much about the past. In preparation for this video, I did a fair bit of writing, and along the way, I kept realizing that I was writing about how I retired and not why I retired. I kept writing about the financial steps I made along the way years ago that helped put us in the position to get where we are now. So if this video does well and has a good response from folks like you, then I guess how I retired will be a future video. So please do us a favor and let us know in the comments section what you thought of this video. And on your way out, if you wouldn't mind and hit that silly like button, that would also help us out, as it tells the YouTube algorithm that people just like you might find this video helpful. Here comes the rain again, so I'm gonna get back inside. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.